It all began in a place where trust should be absolute. The maternity ward of a bustling city hospital. For years, families walked in with joy and excitement, ready to welcome their newborns into the world. Little did they know, a quiet nurse named Helen Price was harboring a dark secret. Helen was the kind of nurse everyone admired. She was always calm, always helpful, and always there when a mother needed reassurance. Parents trusted her without question. She was the steady hand in moments of chaos, the friendly face in an otherwise clinical environment. But behind that kind demeanor, Helen had a habit that would shatter the lives of countless families. For over a decade, Helen worked the night shifts. It was quieter, with fewer staff around, and that suited her perfectly. Mothers rested in their rooms, exhausted after childbirth, while Helen made her rounds in the nursery. She had full access to the babies, and no one ever questioned her presence. It was during those quiet hours that Helen's real work began. Her method was simple, yet chilling. She would swap newborns between families, meticulously altering records to ensure no one suspected a thing. Sometimes she switched babies from affluent families with those from struggling households. Other times she did it seemingly at random. The reasons behind her actions weren't clear. Some said she enjoyed the power, others believed she wanted to even out the lives of children. Whatever her motivation, the results were devastating. The parents, blissfully unaware, would take their babies home, never suspecting they were raising someone else's child. Helen would smile as she handed them over, knowing the secret she held. For her, it seemed like a game. For the families, it was the start of a lie that would go unnoticed for years. But secrets like these don't stay hidden forever. One evening, a mother named Laura Wilson noticed something strange. Her baby, who had been brought to her earlier that day, didn't have the same birthmark she'd seen during delivery. At first, she brushed it off, thinking she was imagining things, but the doubt lingered. Before we get deeper into this chilling story, take a moment to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Stories like this deserve to be heard, and your support helps uncover the truth behind these betrayals. Laura's suspicion grew, and she couldn't let it go. She confided in her husband, who tried to reassure her, but the seed of doubt had been planted. It wasn't until a casual comment from a family friend who noticed that the baby didn't resemble either parent that Laura decided to dig deeper. She requested a DNA test, not knowing the Pandora's box she was about to open. The results were undeniable. The baby Laura had been raising wasn't hers. Shock turned into confusion, and confusion into anger. Who was responsible for this? And where was her real child? Laura brought the issue to the hospital's attention, and what started as a simple inquiry quickly spiraled into an investigation that would uncover years of deception. The hospital was thrown into chaos when Laura Wilson's DNA test revealed the truth. The administrators tried to downplay the situation at first, claiming it was an isolated incident, a rare mistake in an otherwise flawless system. But Laura wasn't convinced. She demanded answers. Her persistence set off a chain of events that would expose the horrifying extent of Helen Price's actions. Investigators were brought in to review hospital records and interview staff. At first, everything appeared normal. No glaring red flags, no obvious mistakes. But as they dug deeper, they noticed discrepancies in birth records, subtle alterations that seemed too precise to be accidental. Babies' weights, lengths, and even footprints didn't match the original delivery records. It was as if someone had gone out of their way to create a trail of confusion. When questioned, Helen remained calm. She denied any wrongdoing and blamed the irregularities on outdated systems and human error. Her colleagues were quick to defend her. After all, Helen was the dependable nurse everyone trusted. But investigators weren't convinced. They began cross-referencing records, and the picture that emerged was chilling. Over a span of 12 years, dozens of cases showed similar patterns. Babies who didn't match their birth records, parents who reported doubts but were brushed off, and quiet settlements made by the hospital to avoid bad publicity. The deeper they went, the more it became clear that this wasn't a series of mistakes. It was deliberate. One of the most shocking discoveries came when investigators interviewed another mother, Emily Carter. Years earlier, Emily had raised concerns about her baby who looked nothing like her or her husband. At the time, Helen had reassured her, saying, "Sometimes babies don't take after their parents right away. Give it time." Emily, trusting the nurse, had let it go. Now, her case was being reopened, and the results were just as heartbreaking as Laura's. Emily's child wasn't hers. As the number of affected families grew, so did the outrage. Parents came forward demanding answers and legal action. Media outlets caught wind of the story, and soon Helen Price's name was plastered across headlines. She was dubbed the baby swap nurse, and her calm demeanor only added to the public's disbelief. How could someone so trusted betray the very people she was supposed to care for? What made it even more chilling was the randomness of her actions. There was no clear pattern, no way to predict who might have been affected. Some families discovered they had raised someone else's child for years while their biological child grew up with strangers. Others realized their doubts had been dismissed, their concerns silenced by Helen's seemingly comforting words. The investigation revealed one consistent element. Helen always worked alone during the night shifts, with no witnesses and complete control over the nursery. She had all the time she needed to carry out her swaps, but why? Why would someone do this? When confronted, Helen remained silent, offering no explanation. Her lack of remorse only deepened the mystery. Before we uncover how Helen's actions were finally brought to light, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Your support ensures stories like these are told, shedding light on the darkest corners of betrayal. As the investigation continued, DNA tests were conducted on dozens of families. The results were staggering. More than 40 cases of swapped babies were confirmed. The hospital's reputation was in ruins, and the affected families faced an emotional and legal nightmare. Many filed lawsuits demanding accountability, but the damage was already done. Lives had been irrevocably changed. Still, one question remained. How had Helen managed to hide her actions for so long? The answer lay in her meticulous attention to detail. She had altered records so subtly that no one noticed, and because she had been at the hospital for so many years, her authority went unquestioned. She was the last person anyone suspected. But her time was running out. Investigators were closing in, and Helen's calm facade began to crack. What would come next would shock everyone involved. Helen Price's calm demeanor began to crumble as the weight of the investigation pressed down on her. The evidence against her was undeniable. The DNA tests, the altered records, and the pattern of her behavior painted a damning picture. But still, Helen refused to admit guilt. When questioned, she simply said, "I was doing what I thought was right." It was a vague statement that offered no real explanation, leaving investigators, families, and the public baffled. The breakthrough came when a former colleague came forward with new information. A retired nurse who had worked with Helen recalled a strange incident years earlier. Helen had once confided in her, saying, "Sometimes it's up to us to decide what's best for these babies." At the time, the comment seemed odd, but harmless. Now, it took on a far darker meaning. Confronted with this testimony, Helen finally began to open up. In a chilling confession, she admitted to swapping the babies, but insisted her actions were motivated by what she called a sense of justice. Helen claimed she believed she was giving some children better opportunities by placing them with wealthier families or removing them from situations she personally deemed unfit. It was a twisted logic that left everyone horrified. Her confession offered little solace to the families she had affected. For parents like Laura and Emily, the damage was irreparable. They had bonded with the children they had raised, only to discover those children weren't biologically theirs. At the same time, they yearned to connect with their biological children, who had been raised by strangers. The emotional toll was immeasurable. In court, Helen showed no remorse. She maintained that she had done what she thought was right and argued that their children had grown up in loving homes. But the judge, the jury, and the families saw things differently. Helen's actions were a betrayal of trust on the deepest level. She had played God with people's lives, causing pain that could never fully heal. Helen was found guilty of multiple counts of child endangerment, falsifying medical records, and abuse of authority. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 15 years. As she was led away in handcuffs, there was no sign of regret on her face, only the same calm expression she had worn throughout her career. For the families, the sentencing was a small step toward justice, but it could never undo the harm that had been done. Rebuilding their lives would be a long and difficult process. Some parents chose to maintain relationships with the children they had raised, while others sought to reconnect with their biological children. Each family faced a unique journey, marked by grief, healing, and the search for closure. This story raises difficult questions about trust and accountability. How could someone so trusted abuse their power for so long without being caught? And how do families move forward when their lives have been uprooted in such a devastating way? If you found this story shocking, make sure to follow us and turn on the notification bell. Your support helps us bring you stories of betrayal, justice, and the truths that demand to be told. This story reminds us that even in places of care and trust, darkness can sometimes hide in plain sight. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay questioning, and remember, justice is a pursuit we must all fight for.